I heard once that Dark Souls levels feel like they were designed first, and then they figured out how the player would go through it. It was probably like Yahtzee or something. The levels in this game feel similar, like they built a town and then figured out a route for the player to go through. The positive is that the levels look great, the negative is that it feels meandering, feels disconnected. It feels like it could maybe be a real place, which is cool, but it doesn't feel like a video game level that's guiding you through it. This isn't helped by enemies spawning all over the map at various points, such as when you pick up a key. To gamers, seeing an alive enemy could be an indicator that you're going the right way, that you haven't been here yet. But when enemies spawn everywhere, even in places you've been, or run around and find themselves in areas that you may not need to go, it can make things more confusing than it has to be. A couple of times I'd run to the exit and I'd think, oh, here's the level exit. Am I done with the level? I thought there was more to explore. Maybe that's intentional, but to me it just feels like the exits were placed randomly, or more likely, they were placed after the map was designed. That's just how it feels. Sometimes I'll find a secret that I thought was the intended path because I didn't know what a button I pressed just did, like in Mission 8. Other times I'll go through a level and not find a single one out of the apparently 7 or so secrets. For games that are so blisteringly fast-paced like this one, and Sprawl, another boomer shooter that I frequently got lost in, I think you gotta have a solid level design, otherwise players will speed right past what you thought was obvious signposting. The auto map being 3D but not rotatable doesn't help things much. I never used it because it just wasn't very useful. To be fair, more complex Doom maps could be hard to traverse even with an auto map. I found a similar problem in a game called Calcium Contract. Map design and pacing is very important in my opinion. I don't like getting lost. I actually stopped playing a boomer shooter called Hyper-Violent because I couldn't figure out where the hell to go within the first 10 minutes. I wandered for way too long until I just gave up and uninstalled it. It's not a good feeling taking a path in Mission 11 for a secret, only for it to drop you into a previous area and wander around the samey environments trying to remember where you went, since there aren't any enemies or any other things to guide you along. There's a minimap in the top right of the screen, and I only noticed it at Mission 11 because it's functionally useless. How am I supposed to read something like that? A note to the devs, if you want to make your levels sprawling, please, for the love of God, add shortcuts in between areas and make sure you're telling me where the hell I'm supposed to be going. As it turns out, in Mission 11, I lost my way and went all the way back to the beginning of the level. And I was right at the end of the fucking level before I did that. On the upside, I got 100% completion for that level, I guess. If this was an earlier level, I probably would have quit playing. To make matters worse, there are many doors in the game that aren't interactable, or will open but only after you press a button or some such. But there's no indicator that that's the case. And rather than make all non-colored doors, to be opened with the relevant color key, openable, there are some doors that can be opened that don't require keys, which just serves to needlessly confuse the act of exploration even further. Some sort of universal indicator as to what doors are or aren't interactable would have been nice, but I know that can come at the cost of some atmosphere, and to its credit, the game does have a pretty damn good atmosphere. The levels look good, even if I am getting lost in them. If you're a level designer, that's something you want to avoid happening. Another huge pet peeve of mine is when I press a button and it says, "A gate has opened." Like, okay? It's more helpful than not giving any feedback at all, but that's where the good I have to say about it ends. I haven't really gotten too lost in this game, not enough for me to stop playing and uninstall it, but I really don't like that kind of design. I understand it can be annoying to play a cutscene and rip control away from the player to show them exactly what that switch did. And I understand it can be hard and maybe boring to design every level in a way that you can see explicitly what the switch you're flipping is doing, but you gotta give me something, bro. I don't care if you need to give me the crazy taxi waypoint error to show me where to go, except you can't do that, because it was fucking patented apparently. So that's cool. As a side note, it's not patented anymore apparently, and I don't really know if it was that good to begin with, but anyways. On top of that, progression is actually tied to exploration. The way you get a large majority of skill points, weapon upgrade points, passive skill points, or whatever, is through finding them in levels. If you're particularly unlucky or just don't bother exploring, you could find yourself hindered when you otherwise may have been thriving. This isn't necessarily a terrible thing, as the base kit is quite strong already, but I personally don't like when progression and strength can vary too widely between players. But that's because I focus heavily on game mechanics and not statistics. I'm more intrinsically motivated, much less extrinsic, but if you're the flip of that, or actually like this kind of thing, that's okay too. There is a part of me that thinks it's cool to see someone with a ton of stuff unlocked and you can see it and be like, whoa, how did you get all that? But unfortunately, with the internet being what it is, secrets don't stay secret for long, and what used to be schoolyard myths and mysteries are now proven and disproven by clout chasers. Man, how did we get here? But, well, I keep going. Because honestly, the gameplay is quite good. The dual-wielding ability is pretty fun to use, and if you switch weapons fast enough, you get no cooldown even after shooting, which feels fun, like it's tech. Enemy design is varied, but honestly, kind of all look the same. They're all the same color, and even though they are distinct enough both mechanically and design-wise, when I'm firing into a room, all I see is blood and guts. Maybe that's on purpose. I don't think that's a very good thing, though. The main way I can tell enemies apart is the sound they make and the way they move, but if I were to only see an enemy for a moment, I wouldn't necessarily be able to tell what it was. The knights, bug demons, pig demons, and shamblers, etc. all have the same big, large enemy silhouette. And the same with the zombies and the shotgun guys and the imps. They're all smaller, though the imps do have wings, which put them apart. But the only way I could tell a zombie apart from a shotgunner is if they blast me in the face or not, which isn't very good. Sure, the zombies wave their arms above their heads, but in the heat of the moment, I need something much easier to tell me what my enemy is. I had a very similar issue with Sprawl, how there were two enemy types specifically that looked way too similar, but had pretty different ways of dealing with them. I forget the specifics, but it was something that stuck out to me in that game as well. I digress. That's not to say the enemies aren't well designed, because I really think they are. Each enemy feels like it has its own role, and its own niche, even if it's only a slight change, and I think that's very cool. It reminds me of Killing Floor 2, how there were so many damn Z types that I literally couldn't tell the difference between them. But I stopped playing Killing Floor 2 before they added all the smaller Z types, so when I tried it after, it felt very strange and awkward. I didn't like the change from the extremely focused enemy design of Killing Floor 1. Every enemy had a unique design and mechanics and ways that you were meant to deal with them, but Killing Floor 2 just feels like a mess in comparison. But I digress, again. I'd also like to mention how enemies that shoot explosives seem to have a radius around that explosive showing where the danger zone is. This is great, but it should be much more pronounced. Right now it's just some black rings that I can hardly see against a similarly dark colored ground. I'd much prefer some other more contrasting color. Speaking of which, there are sometimes humans littered about these levels. I think they were put there for added flavor, but if you kill them or they die, they'll reanimate as an enemy. They don't really add much to the game besides serving to get in the way or maybe make the player feel bad. Sometimes they'll get caught in a fire and scream endlessly. More annoying than anything else. Off the top of my head, Project Warlock 2 has enemies like fast, rushdown melee type, hit scan shotgunner, projectile firing imps like in Doom. The classics never die, apparently. Hey, good design is good design. A large tanky melee enemy, a large melee enemy that's apparently invincible from behind, but I've never had to deal with that mechanic since they're always walking towards me. Large enemy that fires grenades just like from Quake, etc. The game wears its inspirations on its sleeve. I mean, the projectile firing enemies are called imps, and there's enemies called shamblers that use lightning attacks. But that's absolutely not a bad thing. It's not lying about what it is, and I respect that a lot. I don't need every game I play to be groundbreaking. It's enough for it to just do what it does very well. And as I played, that's the vibe I got. It's a fun game. Speaking of which, oftentimes the game gets super chaotic. I didn't play on a terribly high difficulty because I take showers, but sometimes I'd just be taking hits over and over as a horde runs into me or corners me, and I'll end up surviving and feeling like, damn, that was a lot. Good thing I have so much health and or they do such little damage to me. This would change later, but I suppose in a higher difficulty you'd really need to consider how you approach these engagements. But to me, I felt like I was bumbling around and the game just let me do that. Not a mark for or against it necessarily, but it is something I noticed. On the topic of gameplay, enemies have locational damage, taking more damage from the head and probably less from the legs. This is an interesting design choice for a sprite-based boomer shooter, as most of them don't bother with things like that. But for the most part, I like it. Giving me a reason to shoot specific body parts and weapons that are accurate enough to do that is a lot of fun pretty much regardless of the setting or genre. A problem with this is sometimes the game will lock you in a room and spawn a horde of enemies for you to take out. These sections are very fun, but so many times I was caught off guard by a ton of enemies rushing me because I didn't notice the next place of the map is blocked off by this colorful kill all enemies to progress wall. I guess what I'm saying is, I think this sort of event could be communicated to the player much better. Not necessarily with a big message saying, here comes the horde, but, you know, something. A sound cue, a HUD element, something. You gotta give me something. It's a minor gripe, but it is a gripe. This kind of thing actually reminds me of the ending of Project Warlock 1 when you're in hell and just tearing up the hordes and hordes of demons. Kind of felt badass to see how far we've come in strength to literally kill the devil. These moments in Project Warlock 2 feel great. It gives us a reason to use our spells, such as the dueling power, without feeling like I should save this for a special time. Like, this is that special time, and it's time to let loose and go wild. It feels good, like a catharsis. I also really appreciate how the last enemies will have skull icons above their heads, just in case. This sort of event could have really been brought down if, by the end of it, you had to hunt down the last dude just to find out he got stuck behind a crate in a corner somewhere, you know? So, absolutely hats off to the devs for that. Very good choice. That being said, as I wrote that, I had to hunt down the last guy who got stuck behind a crate in a corner of a map or something. Because he was so far away, the icon above his head was very small, so I couldn't tell where he was until I stopped and really looked around. I think making the skull icon only get so small would be a good change, and maybe having them always be on screen with arrows pointing you to them if they're off screen. I did play Project Warlock 1, and I enjoyed it quite a bit. There's the same weird progression system where you can upgrade your weapons, and I just want to say I absolutely love systems like this in boomer shooters. Forgive Me Father has a similar thing where you can upgrade or side grade your weapons, and it will change how they function slightly while still fitting the general niche of that weapon. And most importantly, it changes how the weapon looks, which is so damn cool. In Forgive Me Father specifically, you can start out with a normal looking human weapon and upgrade it into this eldritch monstrosity that eats souls and shits death. It's fantastic and fits with the theme of the games. Very cool, seriously. That being said, there are some optional side objectives you can activate per weapon, one to unlock fire and one for frost, which are these status effects that, from what I understand, have a chance to proc and are increased by your relevant skill level with that element. This seems okay. I want to say I like frost better, but they're both crowd control from how I understand it. Enemies on fire will take damage and won't attack but will run around. Enemies that are frozen won't attack but are stuck in place. Yeah, I'll take the freezing one. There are some things to upgrade the effects further, but I never really looked that much into it, and it's not really necessary to have a good time. I don't like how these things are optional though. Rather, I don't like how you can go multiple missions without realizing that you should probably activate at least one just to get it unlocked. I think a much more elegant solution would be to make all of the side quests active by default and give them much more specific ways of unlocking them. Allow us to chip away at it on our own, with some way to check progress. Alternatively, you could just accept one of the quests for us if we didn't choose one when starting the next level. Or give us a challenge when we pick up a new weapon. Or warn us when we don't have a side quest selected if we can pick one when we try to leave. Something. You gotta give me something. The way it works now just isn't very user-friendly, but once you learn to accept a quest before starting the next mission, it's more or less okay. It's just a feel-bad moment to play through 3 or 4 missions and you realize you could have been unlocking things to try out this whole time. That's my issue with it. Here's another problem. The game doesn't specify certain things. The quest objective for the cannon is to get multi-kills, but that's not nearly as descriptive as it should be. To me, a multi-kill could be 2 enemies with 1 shot, but it could just as easily be 3, or maybe even something like 4 or 5. And as the game goes on, at least the start of mission 10, it seems like the game is moving away from horde encounters and more on single enemies that are very strong. Trying to find out what a multi-kill is with these types of enemies around is a great way to find out what the death screen looks like. Enemies start dealing a lot more damage around this point of the game. I keep taking tons of damage despite moving a lot and taking out enemies as soon as I can. I clearly need to prioritize my targets better, but I have absolutely no idea what's chunking me so much as the feedback from getting hit isn't very good. Back to the side quest, I'm pretty sure the objective was bugged when I tried it. I would line up some enemies and shoot through them, I would get the multi-kill award under the combo counter, and nothing. The quest would still say 0 out of 2, so I just ignored it and kept playing. In fact, I think my game was completely bugged, as the objective I had was to get multi-kills with the cannon, but in my weapon screen it would show my current quest as being for this staff, which it was not. With no way to switch quests or abandon the currently selected one from what I can tell, I got soft-locked out of any of the other fire or frost upgrades because of a bug. I had already gotten the ones I wanted, but still, that's really annoying. I don't know why they didn't just let us be able to abandon or switch quests, but oh well. I think it had something to do with loading a save earlier, I'm not really sure. Speaking of saving and loading, the button Load Last Save is right underneath the Save Game button. If you miss clicking Save Game, the game won't ask if you want to load your game. This is a problem. The game should prompt you just in case you click it on accident. I know for a fact someone has played this game and accidentally loaded a previous save instead of saving. I know that for a fact because I did it myself. Back to progression. Every now and then as I kill enemies, I level up. It keeps saying, leveled up, you are now whatever level. But I don't know what that means. If it increases my stats, they should tell me in that splash message. If it adds a skill point, they should say like under level up, skill point +1 or something. Bro, you gotta give me something here. I don't know what you mean by that. The game has a pseudo-mantling system, or more like a system where you step up a ledge, where if you jump at a ledge and you're just slightly under the height you need, you'll sort of roll over the edge and climb up to it. It seems like such a small thing, but I actually find this very satisfying, and at times I would just climb up the map because I could, regardless of if I thought there was a secret there or something. I'd be Creed's climbing my ass in this area, and then at the top of a pillar, I'd look down and think, oh, there's some treasure there. Nice. That's how good it is. It seems like a small thing, but I don't think it is. In fact, this mechanic sort of brings problems along with it. With and without this, you can easily find yourself in an area completely devoid of enemies because most enemies in the game will spawn in instead of being placed already. There may be many reasons for that, game balance, optimization, whatever, but it can be very jarring to find yourself taking a path the developer didn't intend and ending up behind the trigger for an encounter, only then to pass it on your way out and have enemies spawn behind you, filling up the previously empty area. It's a small gripe, but one worth mentioning, I think. I don't like invisible walls, but maybe preventing me from sequence breaking on accident may be something to consider. That being said, you could just as easily blame me for being an idiot jumping around everywhere, but I wouldn't be doing that if it wasn't so much fun. I think a better alternative to blocking off access would be maybe adding more triggers. Maybe if I take a roundabout way, reward me for breaking the sequence instead of ignoring that I did it at all. Maybe spawn a special enemy instead, or give me a secret. Something like that. Just don't enforce a single way to go when you give me so many options, because there's no guarantee that I'll take the one that you've laid out for me, especially when the levels are laid out the way they are, as I described earlier. A Doom Eternal sort of birthed the whole weapon combo system for me. I don't know which game was the first, but Doom Eternal was definitely a huge one for me. In Project Warlock II, there is a reload mechanic, like many first-person shooters. However, if you change weapons, it will reload in the background. This is, quite frankly, an incredibly good design to encourage the use of weapon comboing. Not only does it encourage you to switch weapons instead of waiting for the long reload, it also encourages you to use more of a variety of weapons, because if you switch back too soon, your weapon will still be in the middle of the reload animation, and you can't fire it. That can be pretty annoying if you shoot something, switch weapons, and change your mind and switch back. Now you have to wait for the whole animation, but that's an adjustment to be made, I suppose, and there's a reason this isn't in every game. Now, honestly, that last point isn't really helped by the game having a shotgun/sniper problem. I've mainly find myself using the assault rifle and the shotgun, and almost never using any other gun, because there's not much of a need to. Doom Eternal solved this by making explicit enemy counters, but even the older Doom from '93 had it too, with the minigun being useful for cacodemons, super shotgun for pinkies and other big types you were close to, the normal shotgun for hit-scan enemies and imps, the energy rifle for stronger enemies and for firing while moving, and the rocket launcher as a super weapon for groups and strong enemies. In Project Warlock II, I seem to only find myself using the assault rifle or the shotgun, struggling to find an opportunity to use or remember the rest of my kit. That could be down to a lot of reasons, such as enemy density, the accuracy and damage of the assault rifle, locational damage on enemies, etc. It's likely just a me problem, as after writing that line I tried using this staff against the knights and other large enemies, and it seems to absolutely melt them. I don't know if I really had much of a reason to know that would happen. It may have been a loading screen tip, but that's not really where you should put useful information like that. You should tell me something like magic is much more effective against heavily armored units, right as I pick it up. Either way, with just the concept of reloading a weapon, it's taking an otherwise boring downtime and turned it into a way to encourage players to use more and different weapons than they maybe normally would, and I think that's pretty cool. The music is fine. Some tracks are nice, but nothing really stood out to me. That isn't to say the music is bad, it really isn't, it's quite good. But nothing really stood out to me, I'm just a picky bastard. Maybe I'll do some active listening to it sometime. The song in E1M8 sounds great. The guitar riff makes me think of like Black Sabbath or Death or something like that. Some lo-fi, amateurish garage band type feel that is very nice to listen to personally. And I don't mean amateurish as an insult, it's endearing, truly. Even if it did sound like it bugged out towards the end, I'm not sure if that's intended or not. Actually, as I heard it loop again, it was intentional. I don't think putting FL Studios' gross beat on the master bus was a great idea, but you do you. I respect the decision even if I think the execution is lacking. Sometimes the music will just cut out and leave you with your footsteps and the death rattles of your enemies. And it's these moments that are a nice, brief respite before the music loops again. I like it, really. They could have kept these moments longer. Like, imagine the song stops playing after so long and it only comes back during one of those horde modes where it'll play fully again until it stops and the process repeats. As it is now, it kinda just feels like they put music over the game and didn't really do much else with it. Which is fine, but there was some room there. One big criticism I have is that sometimes the song will fade out or end and I'll be stuck fighting a horde in silence. It's fine, it's okay, but I can't help but notice that all of this action isn't really being backed up by anything. At one point, I started level 12, and as I fought off the initial enemies near where I spawned in, there was no music at all. I was caught off guard by it, like, why is it so quiet? Doom 2016 showed us just how an incredible soundtrack that is tied into the gameplay can enhance the experience in a very real way. The developers could have done something similar, though maybe not quite as in-depth as making music bits specifically to react to the player's actions like they did in Doom 2016 and Eternal. The music in Project Warlock 2 is fine. It's just interesting comparing it to other games is all. You can learn a lot from the greats, and I think the Doom reboot and Eternal are absolutely one of the greatest greats when it comes to this kind of thing. I had a friend who said he played Doom 2016 mostly because he just wanted to hear what the next song sounded like. That's how you know you've got a great sound team and musicians. Pay your musicians properly, dammit. They're mostly unsung heroes and they deserve it. Speaking of which, the gun sounds and general sound design is really on point. It's one of those things where you only really notice it if it's not there. I wasn't paying much attention to it, but the quality of effects are great. The guns sound powerful, the enemies sound menacing, but not overbearing and goofy. It's honestly great. If I understand correctly, there are 3 characters you play as, but you're stuck as playing as the dude first and not the hot-ass demon babe that they use for marketing. Can you guess which character I wanted to play as? Dude McBro isn't a bad character, I actually like him quite a bit, but looking at the other characters I could have been playing was a bit annoying. As another side note that doesn't really belong anywhere else, for some reason whenever the game saves it will stop completely. This normally isn't an issue, but it did have me fall off a ledge one time in Mission 9, which was annoying. I'm not sure why the game stops completely for half a second whenever the game saves, but that can't be the only way it could work, right? Why does the game lock up so hard whenever it saves? I'm not sure, but it's not a huge issue, and the game regularly saving is great. If it was more true to its boomer roots, there would be no autosaves, and when you died, if you didn't save early and often enough, then you'll have potentially lost a lot of progress. That's a quit moment. You don't want those. If someone's having an okay time but they're a little frustrated and then they get sent back to the start after getting who knows how far through the already labyrinthine level, well, there's no guarantee they'll say, well, now that I know where to go, I can get back there faster. They're probably just gonna quit and not play again, which is not what you want your players to do, even if you already have their money. Speaking of saving, I took the passive ability Stabilizer. If you've ever played Payday 2, it's basically the Stoic perk deck. When you take damage, it will instead deal that damage to you over time instead of all at once. It's a good skill. Lets you potentially survive otherwise fatal attacks. You could take 1,000,000 damage, and as long as you find some way to circumvent actually taking that damage by collecting healing or maybe ending the level, you'll be fine. I actually did this at the end of the game. That being said, I was messing around in Mission 10 and found myself with a damage debt of around 300 without even noticing. I looked around for health packs or something to heal when I decided I need to find an enemy and kill them so they can drop a healing item. Unfortunately, I entered the next area, enemies spawned in, and I died. What also happened was an autosave. This game only has one autosave slot, which is a huge problem for situations like this. This may be an uncommon event, but I don't think so. Every time I would load that autosave, I'd not have enough time to do anything before I died. It doesn't help how when you do load in, there's a very slow and unnecessary fade in. Fortunately, I had just made a save file earlier to test if falling off the ledge at the end of the last level would kill me. It doesn't, it just teleports you back to where you should be. If I didn't make that save there, who even knows how much progress I could have lost? That's a quit moment, and probably would have been one for me, to be honest. Almost all the passives are more or less upgrades with drawbacks, for example, deal more damage but have less maximum health, that kind of thing. So it's not like this isn't something that could have happened, it's just a shame that I got an autosave just before dying, and I didn't really have much control over that part, knowing where the game would autosave, that kind of thing. Anyhow. Mission 7 has a big damage sponge boss to burst down using all your tools and cooldowns, which honestly was pretty fun, and I wouldn't have minded having more of that. Beating her will unlock hard mode. I wasn't expecting the game to do that, but now elite enemies can spawn, whatever that means, they didn't elaborate. Funnily enough, I mentioned that humans were littered around. Well, they can be elites too, but it doesn't seem to do anything apart from giving them more health. They don't even turn into elite enemies when they die. It just feels more like an oversight than anything else, but maybe the devs left it in because they thought it was funny, which I can respect. Beating that boss also unlocks passive abilities, the last little altar in your base. By the way, after every mission, you go back to a base to upgrade your weapons and spells. Since you have to do it here, you can't upgrade out in the field, so it's a bit limited in that regard, but it works out well enough in my opinion. Part of Project Warlock 1 that I didn't like too much was that once you upgrade something, from what I understand, you're locked into that upgrade, so if something looked cool but you went with the other option, you'll just have to play through the game again to see if that's true. That may be a positive for you. I also really dislike how upgrade points are shared between weapons and spells. You have to choose between a mechanically and visually interesting weapon upgrade or a potentially lackluster spell upgrade instead. The fire spell upgrades being just range and duration is particularly disappointing. They couldn't have given me like a thrown grenade or like a rocket fireball side grade. I may have the wrong idea, but that's just the vibe I'm getting from my time in the game. Which isn't my favorite. You know, now that I'm thinking about it, there's a stat called mana, but I have no idea what mana even is. Spells are casted on a cooldown basis, so do they have both 60-second cooldowns and a magic cost? I'm really not sure, and the game doesn't tell me, so I just ignored it. This is me off the script, so mana is actually the ammo cost of the staff, and for some reason it's just like its own thing, and there are some skills and abilities and stuff that increase your mana or give you like mana steal or something like that. But like some enemies will drop like potions that will restore the mana. I don't know why they did it like this or talked about it like that, because it made it seem like it was some sort of resource. Whatever. Moving on. After Mission 7, elite enemies start spawning in. They're very obvious from other enemies, which is good, since they have more health and deal more damage. It's an okay change, and I like the way they implemented it. Something this game does a little, from what I can understand, is that it places some equipment in multiple levels as a redundancy, just in case you missed it in one level and can get it from another. A lot of boomer shooters do this, for what is called like a pistol start, where you only start with a pistol, which is your default weapon. But there was a frost spell pickup in level 8, and I feel like if you didn't get the frost spell by that time, that's either a big problem with the player or the designer. I think if you want your players to have certain equipment at a certain time, you could just as easily put it on a switch that the player has to run over, for example, or in a doorway they have to go through. It's a small thing, but it is something I noticed. After fighting through 12 levels and killing Proto-Satan, which was kind of a clusterfuck to be honest, I then unlocked the next episode in character. I definitely want to check it out, but after beating the first episode, I'm left feeling that it was a little long-winded, only now to unlock the next one. As I was doing missions 11 and 12, I felt like I was just going through the motions. It felt routine. It was getting a little boring, I hate to say. I think part of that is the lack of experimentation the game gave me with the weapon upgrades and passives and all that, the sometimes confusing level design, and how stingy I feel the game is with the points that let me upgrade in the first place. I'd like to clarify by saying I think the game is fine how it's laid out and balanced, but with these types of systems, it felt like eventually I'd be able to revisit or replay some levels. I guess that's the point and appeal of this game though. It's like a traditional Doom shooter, but with much more persistence and choice. You could get to the end of it using a completely different loadout and playstyle that I did. Maybe you dumped all your points into strength and went for a full melee build as a challenge. Something like that. There's definitely some appeal in that, and I really like Project Warlock 1 from what I remember, which is why I was eager to try this one out, and the hot Demon Babe. Ultimately, I do recommend Project Warlock 2, but just keep in mind that it's not the most polished game out there. There's obviously a lot of talent and soul put into this, but I feel like it needed a bit more focus, trimmed a bit more fat, had a bit more testing and QA, a bit more guiding the player perhaps. Or maybe not. Maybe that's what makes it good. The large, uncompromising levels with the artistry, the sometimes confusing levels that let the player get lost instead of railroading them from start to finish, trying to hurry them along like some theme park ride that needs to make room for the next customer. Maybe it's meant to be more of a mindful and deliberate experience and less of a run-and-gun shooter like Doom. Maybe it's an evolution. I don't know. Maybe give it a try yourself. Maybe sometime I'll cover the other episodes. I'll see you later.